This program does not represent the views of this station and may be considered offensive to some listeners. This program may contain mature subject matter, including frank discussions of controversial topics. It is intended for mature, open-minded audiences. Discretion is highly advised. This program is entirely independently produced by and is copyrighted by Frank. It is broadcast here under license.
You're listening to Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles, and I'm Frank because I have to be. In studio today we have Mr. David J. David J. has come into studio to talk about asexuality. Welcome to studio, David.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's start off with our first question. Where you were born, and how were you raised? What were you educated in?
I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, the child of two architects. I grew up in the city in the Midwest, really loving it, skating a lot, going out and canoeing down different rivers.
And can you tell me anything about your upbringing?
Let's see, what specifically do you want to know? I grew up in the city. My parents were both very open-minded and liberal, which is something that has been a great help in my life. They're wonderful people. I have a huge respect for them and a great relationship I have with them. I have two younger siblings, a sister and a brother. And always went to very good schools.
All right, now let's talk about how early were you when you became aware of your asexuality?
I was about 13 or 14. It was around the time when all of my friends began to become aware of their sexuality. And so as all my friends started talking about being attracted to people and having crushes on people and kind of started exploring their sexuality, I had no frame of reference to understand what they were going through. And that was kind of the first moment of realization where I said, something's going on here that's with me that I need to figure out.
Now, was there anybody that you were able to tell about this difference? Anybody you were able to talk to?
At first, I started talking to some close friends of mine. I started talking to some close friends of mine who were lesbians because they'd had an experience kind of figuring out their own sexuality, and so that made me more comfortable. And then I started processing more and more with just really close friends that I had.
And was this still around the age of 13, 14?
This was all through high school.
Okay.
It was funny because my friends would kind of come to me and they would talk about whatever boy or whatever girl kind of was the latest piece of drama in their life, and then we'd switch over and I would talk about kind of sexuality and what it all meant and me trying to figure out where I fit in this really complicated sexual world. And so it worked out, but that allowed me the space to really kind of come to terms with myself and realize that asexuality wasn't a problem.
Can you share any experiences growing up where your asexuality became an issue?
Yeah, I think that the biggest issue for me was that I just didn't know how to think about it. I didn't know how to talk about it because no one was acknowledging that you could not like sex and be happy. So I had to spend a lot of time sort of asking myself, is this a problem? Is it all right for me to not like sex? Is something bad going to happen to me if I don't? And once I'd kind of come to terms and realized that nothing bad was going to happen to me, then I was left with a lot of questions about how do I connect with people. I had issues when I was younger, and it's still complicated. Thinking about how I'm going to be intimate with people, a lot of my friends sort of said, "Oh, okay, well, if we're sexual, then we're dating, and we're boyfriend and girlfriend, or boyfriend and boyfriend, and that means that we get all these special rights and privileges in terms of our relationship. And if we're not sexual, then we don't, and we're not dating, we're just friends, and we don't get any of those special rights and privileges." And so figuring out how I was going to be able to have relationships that kind of were recognized as having that kind of power was a big issue.
For the benefits of our listeners who maybe have never even heard of the topic of asexuality, can you define what those powers and benefits in a relationship would be that they may or may not take for granted?
That's complicated. But I would say that it gets down to a lot of it has to do with what kind of access you have to someone's time, and also what kind of expectations you form about where a relationship can go. If someone expects a relationship to be able to kind of put it in a heteronormative, I guess, context, a relationship to be able to turn into a family, then, well, a family being not necessarily, then they'll invest more emotion in that than if they think, oh, this is someone who's going to be able to be my friend, and maybe 20 years from now we'll stay in touch, but we're not going to be, this relationship isn't going to be able to, I'm not going to be able to move in with this person, we're not going to be able to commit to one another forever, we're not going to be able to raise kids, or some sort of equivalent, really close connection.
Would you say that's the worst thing that happened to you in getting involved in relationships, being asexual?
The worst thing? Maybe, though I think of that as a challenge. I don't think of that as a bad thing.
Okay.
Because it's given me something very difficult to deal with. It's also given me, I think, a unique perspective on thinking about my relationships and thinking about intimacy that's been very valuable for me.
I'd like to ask you about the relationships that you have gotten into, if you'd be willing to talk about them. Up to now, and let's see if we can focus more about your relationships very early on, as you were finishing high school. Were they romantic in nature? Was there an inability to be romantic?
They were very close and oftentimes very affectionate. I didn't call them romantic. The other people I was involved with didn't call them romantic because we couldn't conceive of the idea that a relationship that didn't involve sex could be a romantic one, or didn't involve sexuality could be a romantic one. So we referred to the relationships as friendships. We said, oh, we're really, really good, we're good friends. And we'd hang out together, and sometimes we'd hang out together and be closer than whoever their boyfriend at the time was, which caused issues as well. But that it was really about kind of having this type of intimacy that didn't fit into the mold, that didn't fit into the idea that you have a hierarchy with sexual romantic relationships on top and friendships underneath it.
When you say it was very affectionate and very intimate, can you provide some examples as to what kind of affection an asexual person would be open to that's not sexual?
Well, for me personally, affection is about communicating how you feel about someone to them, any way that you do that. So it can be verbal, it can be through activities, it can be through joking around and poking fun at someone if in your relationship you've established that that's how you show that you care about them. It can also be about touch, and I personally, I'm in relationships, I can be a very physical person. I really like that. So I like hugging people and cuddling with people, and also dancing with people. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Trying to get more into your personal background here. Again, if there's anything I ask you that you don't feel comfortable with asking, you just let me know that you'd rather move on.
Okay.
What have you tried in experimentation to learn about yourself and in that, is there anything that you regret trying?
What have I tried in experimentation? Well, that's a pretty long list. I consider myself a very exploratory person. Are you referring to what I've tried as far as sexuality in experimentation, or do you want me to go through all the places I've visited and the recipes?
I'm looking more about your sexuality.
Okay.
I'm just thinking here that for myself,